All right, so this is a replay review for AeonSpy, who is playing an 8v8 on Glacial Gap. Okay, it's a quick little spawn in. So, first things first. Well, let's have it be. Let's pause and let's talk about reading a map and looking at a map, right? So, when you're looking at a map, you're looking at your starting metal. In this case, there's 8 starting metal, which is actually decent for a lot of spawns, right? And there's a ton of stuff here. So it's a relatively rich map, which means you could definitely go vehicles on it, which makes sense. You can also go bots, but you want to think that, okay, I'll have a lot of metal. How will I be able to spend it later on? There's also a ton of reclaim, and you can know that if you just grab your commander and drag across the entire map. You can do that while the game's going. You can go, okay, there's 3,800 metal. In the middle, there's a lot, right? There's almost 3K. I guess we could probably go here. There's like 2K. That's a lot of metal to fight over. So it's definitely important that you want to fight over it. You ping here. I briefly looked at the replay before. You're going to do a transplay to it, which I think makes sense. We'll talk about that in a second. But we looked at metal. So it's super metal rich because both of the mexes and the reclaim. And then we want to look at energy. Average 14. This is a great wind map, and it has really low wind risk. That's awesome. So we definitely could be building wind. That's a great thing. Alternatively, there's 23 tidal, and 23 tidal is absolutely incredible. That's the best energy production that you can get on this map early game, right? And it comes close to beating out, like, I think it beats out fusions. And I think at 25, it'll beat out AFUs, just to give you some ideas. So you look and you say, okay, wind is good, and you say tidal is good. So that means that you want to build windmills, which you identify. That's awesome. You have 4 mexes here, and 4 mex starts are a little different for a lot of reasons. But on a wind map, if the starting wind is decent, the actual optimal start is 2 windmills into 4 mechs into 2 more windmills. So you go wind, wind, mex, 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 wind, wind. The reason why is that if you don't, you're going to e-stall. And if you drop the 2 in first, you can build all 4 of those without e-stalling. So here we go. We're going to start. And you're going to go what? Mex, mex. Looks like mex, mex, wind, wind. So the reason why this doesn't work as well is because by not building the wind as soon, they don't have as much time to generate energy, right? So you'll build both of these, and then when you start building your other mexes down here, you're going to end up e-stalling. And when you e-stall here, it doesn't really make sense to try to force out this one. What makes more sense is to actually drop a solar and then go back and finish this mex. If you want to min-max it, you can drop a solar, start building it, and when you get a little bit of energy, go back and build this, and then build the solar, and then build that, and kind of go back until they're both done. The reason why you can do it with a solar is that a solar requires 0 energy to build. So even if you're at -92 and +41, you can always build solars because they don't need energy. And that's why building solars in that position is better. All right, so we stall a little bit on this mex, but that's how she goes. We've all had those days. We've all had those moments. And you identify, okay, you're e-stalling. So you're going to go solar into wind. Beautiful. And you're going to give your air player 2 windmills. Oh, okay, so here's another little micro thing we're going to do. You give him some energy production to kind of pay for the transport. That's standard. You're draining a lot of energy because you gave him those 2 in that situation, because all of these mexes are draining 21 energy. You probably should have dropped a second solar and then gone into wind. But you might not actually e-stall here. Now that I said that, let's see. Oh no, okay. So it works out for you. So it worked. I think you could also go solar, but the wind works here. As soon as, okay, and then we take it back. The wind drops, and then you have to drop a solar, which makes sense. And then metal storage. Okay, so I can understand your perspective of this a little bit. You're thinking, I'm not going to build a lab here. I want to build a lab on the front. But there's kind of two weird parts to this. One, I think your transport should get here. Well, he's not actually boosting it, but your transport should get here relatively early, so you shouldn't need a metal storage, and you can just kind of fly here and then build a lab. Maybe you overflow a little bit, but I don't think it's that big of a deal. And you're going to the front, which is concerning because you can build energy back here and it's safe for the majority of the game, right? Until the front falls. But if you're here and you want to try to build energy, it's super scary, right? So it makes more sense for you to try to build as much energy as you can back in your base where it's safe. There's also the thing where metal storage is 330 metal, and you probably want to use that metal for something else. However, the counter argument to that is that there's 2000 metal here, and so maybe you want to try to stockpile it. I am not as big of a fan of that argument because if you look at your team, like tons of people need metal. So worst case scenario, you start eating a bunch of this metal and you can send it to your blue player who's C who needs a ton of metal, right? Or you can just overflow it into your team anyway. I don't think that's necessary. I think you should have just been spamming wind. And then we go LLT. So I'm not a big fan of this LLT kind of for two reasons. First is your position on the map, right? Your base is in the back line. And if anything gets past here, they're probably going to end up like trying to hit this, or maybe they come here and maybe they hit that. But your base is like tucked away here, so it's unlikely that you get raided. But also look at the placement of your LLT. LLTs cannot fire over other tall buildings, specifically like the windmills and the metal storage here. So this LLT has a firing range that's kind of like this, okay? And if we hit A, we can see its actual attack circle. This is its range. So if one tick does get in here, it's gonna run like this. And I mean, maybe it runs here. It sees the LLT and it goes, oh, okay, nope. And it's gonna run all the way back here. This is versus like someone who knows how to micro ticks. They can come back here and they can just start killing everything back here because your LLT is blocked. So if you want to have an LLT, you need to make sure that it's like a little bit forward, or like maybe you could build it down here so that it covers this so that nothing can come this way. But you'd almost need like two of them to protect your base. But in the situation you're in, it's kind of pointless because of your position on the map. And then it's doubly worse because you're going to go leave and go for the front. You need as much energy as possible. And building LLTs means that you aren't building windmills, which is kind of what you want. Okay. You have a transport coming. I think this is all relatively standard, but I think that something that you should do at this point is talk to your allies and just get a con from them. So you can literally just go, whoops. You can go here and you can say, can I buy a T1 con, please, right? And you pay him the 110, and then the con can just come down here and like your commander, you can just chill here and just build wind, right? Just because you don't have a lab here doesn't mean you can't build here. It's way safer to build the energy here than it is there. Or because it's such a good title map, you can do the same thing here. You can say, C con, please, will pay. And then you can get a C constructor and you can build title, which is 85 for 23 energy, which is just amazing. And then you can, build it. You probably want to space it. Actually, I think you could probably do rows like that, right? And then you can just build title, and that thing can spend the whole game building title back there. But you need to scale your energy economy, and it's much easier if you can do it in your own base and do it gradually, right? One constructor building windmills isn't going to drain a lot of energy, isn't going to drain a lot of metal, but it's going to slowly scale your economy so that as the minutes pass, you have enough energy to do everything you need to do. So I would say at this point, when you're calmly, is buy a constructor, buy a land constructor, buy a vehicle constructor, and figure out a way to scale your energy economy. The other part of this that I think is that because you're not building other things, you have almost no e-storage. And that's scary because frontline commander play like cloak and D-gun, and even your weapon requires energy to work. So if anything, I think that before you left, you maybe could have dropped an e-storage back here. Maybe when you built the metal storage, you could have dropped an e-storage just so that you're a little bit more prepared for when you get to the front line. All right, and we are flying in. And I feel like, hold on. Let me get it so that I can't see anything else. Okay, perfect. So here's your commander, and you are flying to here. This map is mirrored east to west, right? It's like it's entirely the same. And there's a little line that runs through the middle that splits the geos that says, okay, this is the middle. So if you guys are both here and your team has all these mexes and their team has all these mexes, you're equal mex income, right? But the whole reason why you're flying is to get here sooner. And you want to get here sooner so that you can set a forward front line. If you come here, you're just running to the middle of the map. That's kind of like where you already are. So instead of going there, it's better if you can kind of go farther up. Not to mention that if you try to fortify here, you have this whole massive space to try to hold. Whereas if you fortify here, this is much smaller to hold. And if you think about it economically, right? If you're here, this is the middle line of the map, and you hold these mexes, but you deny the enemy team these mexes, you're removing 6 metal a second from them. But if the enemy ends up here, they can kill these and you can't hold them. So you deny 6 metal a second, but you're not using those mexes to mine from either. Whereas if you're commander, if you just spend the extra like 4 seconds running a little bit farther up, you could start building LLTs here and you could deny most of these mexes, right? And when you deny these mexes, that's massive because you claim these. So your team gets an additional 6 metal income and their team loses 8, all because you flew just a little bit farther forward. So when you're on maps like this, where you're a frontliner, always think like, okay, where's the middle of the map, right? Where's the middle of the map? And if I'm first, can I get how far towards the enemy team can I get to start denying mexes? And sometimes it's really hard to know. A good sort of rule that you can use is you can look at your own team and you can say, okay, he's calm walking. How far is he, right? He's not that far out. And well, these guys should have been calm walking a while ago, but normally you'd see them calm walking here and you can say, all right, they're not that far out, right? Like if we turn off player view, he's here. So he's coming up, but I bet you could have made it just a little bit farther and then LLT'd right there. All right, first thing is an LLT. I don't hate it, but again, this LLT doesn't protect these mexes, right? Like what we just talked about. These mexes aren't protected. So if this LLT was just like a little bit up, at least you could protect these mexes. So you get an additional 6 metal income. If you fortify here, they can kill all these. And then you deny them 6 metal a second, but you don't get the 6 metal a second. And that's really important. Okay, so your commander is building this, and what do you have queued? Okay. So a couple things here. Something that I think is really good to get in the habit of is incredibly long building queues. And it'll sound comical at first, but everyone APM stalls. I don't care if you're Ragna, I don't care if you're Austin, I don't care if you're 60 OS, whatever. Everyone will have moments where they APM stall. And a great way to counter that is by having stupidly long queues. And you can queue things before they're even finished, right? So while you're building this, you can say, okay, let's look at the situation. I need more build power at the front. So let me build 2 constructors, or let me build 1 constructor. And then let me build like a couple pawns so that I can fight off any other raiders. And then let me build a Lazarus so I can maybe eat these rocks. Then I think I want another con for build power. And then say 5 pawns for more kind of holding the line. And then maybe I want rocket bots, right? And you literally can queue up like 25 units while that's building. And it seems silly because you're like, well, I want to build each unit specifically, but a lot of times you won't, right? Like maybe you get raided, maybe you get bombed, maybe something happens somewhere else on the map, and you look, and when you look back, oh, you haven't been building units. Instead, just queue all that in your factory beforehand, right? So that even if you do APM stall, guess what? You've been building, at least you have something from it. That's also true with your commander. Your commander has the most build power in the entire game, right? For like actually building things. He has 300 build power. Your bot lab only has 100 build power. As soon as he builds this, you can say, okay, build this, and then you can just hit guard, like hold shift, hit guard, and click it. And then as soon as it's built and this starts building, he can boost it so that you can make units quicker. Your commander has radar, right? This is your commander's radar. You do want radar, but so while you do want radar, you want to get your first unit. Oh yeah. So this is what I'm talking about, right? Like we really need units out right away, right here, because you didn't queue anything. Both your commander and your lab are just chilling. And the first thing you want to do before you build that is you want your commander assisting your lab, right? You're going to be building 3 times as fast. Well, sorry, from 100 build power to 400 build power, right? So if he's assisting the lab, you build things so much quicker, and you need to build things quicker because you can see stuff is coming in. Like, well, if you didn't have the radar, you would still see the inner, right? And so you'd see, okay, stuff is coming here. You need units, right? You need units and you need light laser towers. So you can build a constructor, and then this constructor can boost the lab, and you can make pawns, and then your commander can start making LLTs, right? Because you're going to need LLTs to hold. Okay. So let's stop and talk about a few things. First is the actual HLT itself. HLTs are not like guardian towers that kill everything that come in their range. They're support towers, and you kind of need units with them because otherwise one single artillery, just one tier 1 artillery, 100 and whatever, 30 metal, can come up here and he can just kill it. And it can do nothing. The main purpose of an HLT is that you have units kind of all in here, and that when something comes to attack them, you trade better because when they come in here to attack, your units attack, but your HLT also attacks. So you do more damage per engagement, and then it's kind of like a war of attrition thing. But with an HLT, you pay a premium for range, right? The HLT is 212 DPS. An LLT is 150 or 160, right? And it's only 85 metal. So for 85 metal, you get 160 DPS versus 440 metal for 213 DPS. So instead of building this, I would say this first con can just boost the lab for more build power, and your commander can start building more LLTs down here. The other absolutely massive problem with an HLT, HLT is an Overwatch. It's a heavy laser tower, which is what this is. If we hit A, this is its range. Didn't follow the circle exactly. We already know there's units here, right? What's the problem with this picture? No one else from your team has any units on the front. So even though you've got this HLT here, these guys can literally just run past and start attacking other things, right? They can run here, they can run here. This HLT doesn't really deny the area. It just kind of like offers a little bit of protection, but it doesn't really do that because if they have a bunch of grunts, they can just run in and kill it. So if you do want to fortify an early T1 position, I would say the vastly superior option are pop-ups, which are Dragon's Claws and Dragon's Maws. Dragon's Claws are the lightning arm ones. Dragon's Maws are the fire core ones. And you can build those. Those are great because like the lightning ones chain and they do a lot of damage. So they're great versus things like grunts, but also when they're down, they take reduced damage. So if there is artillery shooting it, a lot of times you can just out repair the artillery or out repair the like the whistlers if whistlers are chipping at it. So for that reason, I would say if you do want a pork, you would build Dragon's Claws, not an HLT earlier on, but I think LLTs would be better anyway. And in this one, because it can't move and they can just run around it, don't build an HLT first. Build like 10 pawns, right? If you have 10 pawns and they're like right here, then if someone runs this way, your pawns just run down and stop. Or if they run this way, your pawns run down and stop. Or if they attack forward, your pawns are there and they can respond, they can attack, they can do everything while you keep building behind. All right. So you're at 186 energy. And if you look at your team, right, you are almost the lowest on your team. A lot of these other people just have way more E and you need to be scaling. Okay, so this is what we talked about, right? These blitz can just run past the HLT. If you had pawns, the pawns could have run down. And he sees that there's stuff because there aren't military units here. So if these get in and no one stops them, they could come up, they could hit that, they could hit your base, they could kill all sorts of stuff. So that's why units earlier on are kind of better than just an HLT. Ideally, you want a mix of like LLTs and units and doing all of that. But this kind of brings up another point here. You see a bunch of radar dots, right? But radar dots don't tell you anything about what the unit is. You just see dots and you go, uh-oh, there's a lot of dots here. This could be a bunch of rovers, which is very little metal, and they don't do that much damage, right? Or they could be all stouts or brutes. Well, maybe not at this point, but you don't know what's here. These could be LLTs. This could be RD. This could be anything. You need to know what's here because you don't need to know. You need to know what to make with your lab, right? You decide, okay, let me make pawns. I think that's a great choice, right? But if these are all LLTs, you could just kill all of them with one rocket bot. The problem is we don't know because we didn't look, right? You could just make one 17 metal tick and he can just go da da da. And then you can see, oh, okay, there's grunts there, right? There's grunts and there's some LLTs. So verse grunt, like if you just want to start creeping forward with your own LLTs, your LLTs will fight into these grunts and kill them. And you would know, okay, I can just make rocket bots, right? Because if he attacks me with grunts, the LLTs kill him and his own LLTs will die to my rocket bots. The problem is because you don't know, you don't have that information, you're kind of just in the dark, right? You're like, well, I'm not sure what I should do. And so these are going. So for that, more units, right? Especially early on. And you need to be assisting your lab. Your lab has 100 build power, like we talked about, right? That does not build things very quickly. If you had this con building, it's almost twice as fast, right? So you want to be building more construction bots. In this case, it's even more important to build construction bots, right? Because you have a horrible energy economy and construction bots are 7 energy a second. So if you built construction bots, right? If you build, say, I mean, now that this is stabilized a little bit, you could drop like 2 or 3 more construction bots. 3 construction bots is 21 energy a second. That's a massive boost to you. Right? And they can help build all this stuff here. Another thing that you kind of want to, when you're looking at your economy, right? Regardless of what state, well, and early in the game, right? There, we say there's 3 resources, right? There's metal, there's energy, and there's build power. So if you have high metal like you do, and you have low energy, especially early like this, the best thing to build is solar, which you identify and you start building one. So good job. That totally makes sense. If it's reversed, right, where you have high energy and low metal, then you build converters. But if you have high metal and high energy, then you need more build power. In this situation, yes, you do want more solars, but a solar is 20 energy, right? And a con is a solar provides 20 energy and is 150 metal. And a con is 110 metal and it's 7 energy. So don't be afraid to build more cons just to get a little bit more energy and more build power. I think that definitely would have helped you here. But let's see what else happens. So again, your lab is idle. Look at how much metal you have. You could just be building pawns or rocket bots or anything. You need this lab always building. Luckily, that guy APM stalled and didn't actually kill anything. So you're kind of lucky there. Okay, you do a little poke with the... Sweet. Okay, so you do a little poke with the pawns. That's awesome. And you could even send them up and maybe attack. So I normally love aggressive play. This is one of the few times where I would say this is probably not the best aggressive play because you don't have any units, man. You've got an LLT, an HLT, and you're building a frontline gauntlet. any combination of like T1 units, it's like 500 to 700 metal, can just run up and kill all of this, right? Maybe you can, well, you can't even degun because you don't have enough energy. You didn't build energy storage, you don't have enough energy production. So while I think it is awesome to raid and scout, like I think that you were doing like what I said, that's awesome, but you need to do it here because you don't have units to protect this. Okay. Gauntlets are kind of a trap. And in this situation, maybe they're not as much of a trap, but especially where you're placing it is a huge trap. You see all these radar dots, right? If you hit A, look at how much range this has. And like you'd be killing mexes back here. You know this stuff is here. Why is the gauntlet on the front lines, right? If they run up and attack, you have no units, you have no other LLTs, they can just attack this and run away, right? If you just put the gauntlet like back here, where's your con? You can see. So first, don't build the gauntlet, but I'll explain it in a second. But for the position of the gauntlet, right? If he's like back here, he can still hit all those things that are on the front line there, but he's far enough back that the LLTs and other things can tank for him. You don't need to build him that close. Okay, second, even though you have a lot of metal, and you should have been producing units, gauntlets are 1250 metal. That is a lot of metal for T1. That's almost half of a T2 lab, right? If you think about it in like other things, like that's, you know, LLTs are 85 LLTs, right? 10 LLTs is 850. You could have 10 LLTs here. And I think it's a lot scarier than just one gauntlet. You pay an absolute premium for the range of the gauntlet. But the problem is you don't know what's here, right? We never scouted this. You haven't seen any of this. So all of these, you could build a gauntlet and every single thing here, these could all be grunts and they can just run at you and kill you because you don't have anything here. So if you do feel like you need to build a gauntlet to control area, one, make sure you know what you're controlling, right? What are these? If these are all LLTs, the gauntlet's okay. If these are all units, the gauntlet just dies instantly because they just run up and attack. But the problem is we don't know. So idle lab. So the main issue that you kind of aren't, the two main issues that you kind of aren't really dealing with, right, is you need longer production queues. You always want to be building stuff, and we still aren't scaling our e-storage. Or scaling our e-production. Also, if you had been making constructors, like if you had a bunch more constructors, you could have taken these. Always take open mexes. Sometimes, you know, like, you know, in this one, it's like, okay, wait, he's here. Is this mine? Is this his? Like, who owns these mexes? Honestly, it's irrelevant because if you guys sort it out later, that's fine. These are 2 metal a second. A T1 mex is 50 metal to make. So if you just put this down and it lives for 25 seconds, it's paid itself off, right? So if you come here and build these and you only hold them for a minute and then your ally says, hey man, I only have 3 mexes. Or I only have whatever, 5 mexes. Can I get these mexes? And you select them and you transfer them over. If you held them for 1 minute, you come out ahead, right? And more importantly, if he doesn't take them later, you're still generating 8 metal a second from these. So always try to take empty mexes. Okay. Yeah, that's hilarious. All right. So another thing, this is going to be funny in the context of it. So these already are just going to kill your gauntlet because you're not sure what's here and you don't have anything protecting it. Remember before we talked about the midline here, right? So you're denying these mexes. A great thing to do, but not in this case, but just for future reference, is if there are contested mexes, sometimes you can sneak down and you can put twilights on them. So twilights are 4 times as expensive as a T1 mex, but they're cloaked. And they're awesome because a lot of time contested mexes like this, if you can get one down, the enemy might run up and look and they go, okay, there's not a mex on it. And then they back up. And because it's cloaked, they won't notice it. And that's awesome. The other reason why twilights are really cool is that if an attack comes here, you can self-D it. right? You can, on grid, it's Control B. On default, it's, I think, Control D, right? And then the Twilight will do an area AoE emp stun. And so it's kind of like a defensive thing as well. The reason why they're not great in this situation is that they require, one, a lot of energy to build, and then any cloaked unit requires cloaking, like requires energy while it's cloaked, right? So that's 12 energy a second. So just with your energy economy, you kind of can't do it. That also brings in this issue, which I didn't catch right away. A cloaked jammer is absolutely amazing for any defensible position, right? You don't want to get shot. It's cloaked, so it's harder to find. Jammers are amazing. The problem is you've been struggling with energy the entire game, right? Look at how much energy a Sneaky Pete is. It's 8,500 to build. Yeah, it's only 240 metal, but it's 8,500 energy. The most expensive T1 bot is like 3,000 energy, right? A Centurion, 3,000 energy. Your HLT, 4,000 energy. So by building this early, you just are decimating your energy economy. And on top of that, if you look, right, it's 25 energy a second to maintain that cloak. So if you do want to build one, I'd say one, maybe build it a little farther back so it's harder to see, but you can also just click this and decloak it, and then you're going to gain 25 energy a second, which is like more than a single solar that's building, right? So first of all, yes, it's good to build jammers, but build them a little later when you have more energy. And two, if you don't have the energy like you do here, decloak them. And then also, I'd probably put it maybe a little bit farther back there, or try not to put it near other units, right? Because like if someone attacks this mech and it explodes, it'll damage this. So I'd say either put it like there, or you could maybe put it like down there, but try to put it not next to anything else so that AoE won't hit it. All right, where are we at? Okay, so this is your first. So you see there's a commander and you see there's a bunch of T1 already. This is what I was talking about with the position of the gauntlet, right? Because it's here, nothing can protect it. If it was farther back, it would have been much, much safer. They probably wouldn't have seen it and you would have been fine. So you see them putting down some dragon's claws or dragon's claws, sorry. Your HLT is doing that. All right, so now you start putting down claws, which is fine. One other thing I'd say early is when you start, if you're going to put down claws, I would always put down a construction turret, right? You want to put down a nano, and you can put the nano down like a little bit farther back, you know, or maybe you could put it like here. But when a pop-up is down, it has incredibly reduced damage. And if you have a nano, it'll auto repair everything in there. So like a turret like this that's down, if it's getting shot by like 3 artillery and the nano's repairing it, it won't die. It'll just be completely fine and it'll survive. So a lot of times it's good to build a nano, and you need more build power anyway, because you should be building units and that factory should be boosted. Oh, okay, so here's an attack in. If you had more LLTs, well, the LLTs would definitely take damage there, but you kill a bunch of grunts, okay. Always remember you want to eat wreckage whenever it's on the ground. Are you gonna com bomb? You're gonna degun. Okay. While it worked there, I would say that's super risky to do because you just now get to see everything else that's behind here, right? So you know that there's another commander there. If you're gonna run up like that, if you have more energy, right, you can cloak and you can run to right here. And if you're right here and you're cloaked, you won't be a radar dot and you won't be visible. You're completely invisible to the enemy. And then you could run up and try to degun. The reason you can't do that is because you don't have energy storage. So cloak is 100 energy a second if you're standing still, or 1,000 energy a second if you're moving. And a degun is 500 energy to fire, right? So if you had energy storage and you had the extra, I think it's 6,500. Let's see. 6,000. If you had the extra 6,000, that's 6 seconds where you can just walk up here cloaked, and then you wait for a second, recover and then you can run up and then you can degun, and then you're not in any danger at all. The reason why I don't like you doing this is because you don't know what's here. So if these were like Janice and you run up, he just kills you. And there's like, you just lose your commander and then you're completely dead here. They could have rolled over you before, but we won't get into that. So this is the first time that you see what the enemy has. And that's important because when you see what they have, it tells you, what do I need to build? In this specific situation, right, there's artillery, there's whistlers, and there's a ton of LLTs. There's not that many grunts. A bunch of them died. The only real kind of scary thing here are stouts, because stouts can just kind of like run in, they could run through and they can do a lot of damage, right? What you can build here, you just build rocket bots, just spam a bunch of rocket bots out, because if rocket bots are moving, they can fire and they can kill the artillery, right? The artillery can't hit anything that's moving. And so you can attack and you can just push the artillery back by kind of running like this and then running back and then running like this and then running back. Or you can go forward and go back if you see the artillery in the air and it's going to miss you. And then if the stouts do attack your rocketeers, you can just degun. You can just run your commander up and kill them, right? So if you built like a bunch of LLTs here and then your rocket bots moved forward and were attacking and doing that, you could totally break this position, right? This actually isn't that fortified of a position. So he deguns here. And you see that they have a jammer. Okay. So the other thing I would say is, when you're fighting into something like this, like you can totally break that. But a lot of times when you want to kind of like look at the map, you want to look and see like, okay, like what are my allies really going to contribute here? Like this guy is, I mean, this is kind of a newer game, but you want to see like, you know, do my allies have artillery that can break this, or what are my allies building, right? I've been focusing on you, but a lot of times what you are building and what you make is dictated by where your allies are and what your allies are doing. Here, I think if you look up here, you can kind of see this looks relatively equal for the moment, although his commander is not there, which is a little concerning. And these guys should be helping you, but they're not quite there yet. So here you want to be defensive, because you're fighting two players, right? You saw that there are two players here, and there's the alternative for this player to come down and attack you. So you do need to be defensive. But when more of these units come up here, or maybe units come there, right? Or this guy decides, hey, let me join the fight. Once you have more people here, you can try to break, but always just kind of be cognizant of like, hey, you know, I'm fighting two players. It might be more dangerous. In this specific situation, I think you can just kill them with rocket bots and good micro, but we're going to build a gauntlet. We talked a little bit about gauntlets before, right? A gauntlet's 1200 metal. It's not a great investment. I'd say it's also not a great investment here, because if this 1250 metal was just like 10 rocket bots, you could just kill all that and you don't need it. But you built it farther back this time, which is awesome. The one thing that is nice is because they have a jammer, once this is done, you can just hit A and you can just ground target and you can just pick off all of these. So if you are going to build them, that's fine. Just, okay, what? He just walked into the turret the whole time. All right. So two parts here. Let me finish this first part. One, when you build gauntlets like this and you see them, you can A, target, right? And you can slowly pick these off. Two, if you see a commander running in and then he dies, as soon as a commander dies in a lane, that should be like a warning alarm to be like, I need to push, or I need to like capture as much of this as I can, for two reasons. One, a commander death explosion is, well, here, that's kind of a bad example. See this outer yellow ring? That's the radius of a commander death explosion. It's huge. And a commander wreck is 1,250 metal, right? It's the same cost as a gauntlet. You always want to try to reclaim wrecks early, because that's like one of the main burdens for a T2, right? It's 8 minutes, so someone should have T2. Okay, well, ideally someone on your team, even earlier than this, should be making T2. And the main like barrier for making T2 is metal. So even if you aren't going to use it, like you could have sent your metal to your techer if you had one. Even if you aren't going to use this metal, it's always worth it to come up here. Like this guy can keep building the gauntlet. Your commander can come up here and you want to reclaim this metal ASAP. If you aren't going to reclaim the metal, or like, let's say if you come up here and there's like an army of stouts that you couldn't see before, right? You're like, oh my God, there's all these units and there's these LLTs. You just run up here and you just degun it. D-guns destroy Rex. Nothing is left behind. It disintegrates. So if you come up here and you can't get this metal, you just kill it. You just D-gun it. And then they don't get the metal, right? They're down a commander and they don't get the metal. So first, you want to fight and you want to take that. Second, I showed you the commander explosion, right? If a commander dies here, he probably killed a bunch of units that were there, right? When we turn off the view, remember there were, I think, 7 artillery and there was a whistler there. And I think some other stuff came in as well. All of that died, right? The only thing that's here now are some reinforcing artillery and some stouts and some stuff there. But a bunch of stuff died here. So if you did have units, when the commander dies, just run up and start attacking, right? Totally makes sense. Because you want to capitalize on that loss. He shouldn't have walked into your turret, but that's how it goes. All right, and Gauntlet is almost up. So we talked about energy scaling, but just another reminder, you always want to be scaling. In this one, if you could have just bought one constructor from blue, you could have been scaling here, or you could have bought, wind and you could have gone wind there. Would have been amazing. When you wind farm, right? A lot of times you can just nano. Oops. So you can just build construction turret and you can throw it like there. And then you just build wind and you can go like rows of 2 so that they don't chain. Right. And you can queue up, like I said before, long build queues. You can queue up an aircon to build like 50 wind. And same with this, right? Look at these guys. Blue queued up like 100. Well, I don't know what that is. Blue queued up an insane amount of energy production. But that's what you should have done, right? Because if we look at him, he's at 920 energy production, right? If you had that, you could just produce anything you wanted. You could instantly go T2. You'd have so much more, all just because at the start of the game, he said, hey, you guys go here and just build that, right? That's the only difference between your 2 build orders, was telling these guys to build a bunch of energy and back. All right, what do we got here? All right, so you are a little aggressive. Okay, so you didn't secure it. He saw that he couldn't secure it, so he degunned it. So that's what happens. He made the right play there. And here you kind of have these rocket bots and you can start going. Wait, what is this gauntlet firing at? Oh, here we go. All right, so your gauntlet's going to fire at that. Your gauntlet's not firing. If you're going to make a gauntlet, make sure that you're using it the whole time to do this. And then if you aren't, you can always just reclaim it and then use the metal for something else. There are tons of like really high TS players who will actually gauntlet crawl, right? So like they make the gauntlet here and then they attack. And then once all this stuff is dead, then they just reclaim it and then they build it a little bit farther up. What you should be doing here is just ground attack. You just click on it, you hit A and you go boom, and then you start killing these. And when they die, you'll see a little explosion or like there'll be a wreck. And if you're poking with your rocket bots, you'll know when they die as well. So he's building LLTs kind of like you probably should have done a while ago. But we're good. Always, especially early on, you want to make as many LLTs as possible. So you realize that you probably want a little bit more pork here. The pop-ups are good. I like that. I would have built more. Okay, so nano, this is good. It's a little late, but still awesome. On frontline bases, it's better to kind of space them out, I think, because if one dies, they might chain, and you want to try to minimize the amount of damage you could lose. So Gauntlet's shooting stouts. Okay. Okay, so if we look up here, this guy's going to get rolled in a second, and you need to kind of prepare for this. When you see this happen and you realize he could attack down here, the best thing you can do is just run your commander up. And once he's here, you can cloak him so that if they do come, you can just degun and kill the entire army. Whenever there's metal on the ground, you always want to try to take it. So this resbot can go over here and eat that, and you'd have more metal that even if you weren't using, your allies could be using. The other thing is this resbot's just been chilling here for a long time. A great thing you can do with resbots in a situation like this is you just click repeat and you hit repair. You go like this. And then he'll just always repair anything that gets damaged in this area. So your commander, he'd repair it, right? Or like if this LLT takes damage, he'll repair it and then he can just go back. And you can even make it more complicated where like you right click here, like you hit repeat, you click here, and then you do an area repair, and then he'll come up here. Oops. He'll come up here, he'll repair, and then he'll walk back until there's a damaged unit, and then he'll come back up, and then he'll repair, and then he'll go back. But you kind of never want to idle units, or if they are idling, you want them to be like on something like auto repair. Your gauntlet is like shooting at moving stuff up here. It really needs to be killing those, like I said before. And your commander can come up here. You don't really have the E for this, but if your commander's up here and he's cloaked, like we talked about over here, then you could degun all of these. But when you see him coming, you need your comm up on the front lines. Rocketeers can't fight into brutes because the brutes are just way tankier. The only way they're able to do so is if there are LLTs that they can kind of, light laser turrets, these that they can kind of back up into. Another really important thing with unit control is when you're using Rocketeers, you don't want to just like click them forward. If you use a fight command, which is F on grid, and then drag the line, they move as far forward as they can until they can attack something, and then they'll shoot. In this situation, because there are jammers here, you could also just issue a move command to here and then attack like that, and then every single rocket would fire and you could start killing those LLTs. Okay, so you had asked me only to watch like the first, I think 10 minutes because you were looking for optimizations, and we're at 11. I'll watch a little bit longer, but I do like the Twilights. We talked about those before. The only slightly concerning thing with these is SpaceX is the death radius. These would probably die long before, but if this dies, it'll stun all of those. And if this dies, it would stun everything here. So luckily this gauntlet's out of range, but always be aware when you're building. This guy probably just doesn't know that that's how it works. Always be aware when you're building. You don't want to build stuff around these because you could end up just like ruining yourself. This is the same issue as this gauntlet here, right? It's way too far forward. Its range to shoot is like, it's shooting at stuff that there's nothing here, right? I mean, you could maybe kill a mech, but there's no reason to have it up that far. And if we're being honest, there's pretty much no reason to have like two gauntlets like that when you haven't even killed everything here, right? These gauntlets would need to be attacking there. With that said, I would never do this. When you have this much metal, you really should have just gone T2. Or like when this guy's going T2, you should just pump him with a lot of your metal. Something that's really good to get in the habit of is you don't want to hoard a bunch of metal, especially when other people need it. Your blue player has been metal starved the entire game. So if you have like 1700 metal and you've had 1700 metal for like a minute and you're not going to spend it on anything right away, just give it to blue. Give it to someone else who can use it, right? Because that 1700 metal is, you know, another destroyer or, you know, or like a couple destroyers or a bunch of frigates. It'll help him win somewhere else on the map. Just because you can't win in your specific situation doesn't mean the metal is best spent here. Sometimes it's better to think about like, okay, where can metal, you know, be better spent? A lot of times it's in tech, but a lot of times it can also just be like, send it to him and then he can win C. And then if he wins C, he can kill everyone else for us, right? So always kind of be cognizant of that. You never want to float this much metal early on. And you start to build, so this is Frontline Wind, and this is the problem with Frontline Energy, right? Is that if it gets raided, you just lose all the energy production that you had made. Okay, so I'll stop there. It's like 11 minutes and let's kind of just review some of the basic, I think some of like the big issues that we saw. So first was your economy. You always need to be scaling energy economy. And in your specific situation, because you transported to mid, the best way to do it for there is either build your own bot lab and then reclaim it later after you've built a couple bots, or you can just buy a T1 bot con, right, from an ally. And that's on most maps. Specific to this map where titles are amazing, you could have bought construction ships, and you could have spammed titles back here. Either of those would have been a great solution to ensure that you keep scaling and that you have a ton of energy, right? He has 1.3K. He has 1,000 more energy production than you do, just because that's what he did, right? Okay, so that's the first. We talked about kind of optimizing this and the need for energy storage, not metal storage. Super important. There were a bunch of times where if you had energy storage, you probably would have been able to do a lot more things. When you first got here, right? It's like, all right, here's the middle of the map. You stopped here, but there wasn't really anything here, right? When you stopped here, the other commander, I think, was like right here. If you just flown a little bit further in the transport and then dropped here, instead of having your base here, you would have had your base here. And yeah, maybe it's a little concerning that you could get raided there. Maybe they could come here as well. But if you're here and you deny these mexes, it's a massive boost, right? It's a huge boost to your team. And hopefully your team would come up here. Watching this game and how it played out, that could have been dangerous, because if you're here and this guy is able to swoop down, it could have been a little scary. But even if you are like here and you can kill these mexes, that's a big win for your team. So where's the middle line of the map? How far can I push it? You know, maybe it's dangerous to go all the way there, but maybe if you just gone a little bit further up, you probably could have secured those mexes, like, and held them for a lot longer. Biggest problem for me, aside from energy generation, was build power. You almost never assisted your lab. And it's something that's super important to do. People forget that bot labs only have 100 build power. That's like nothing, right? If you built 2 bot cons and just had them assist it, you would have had more energy and you would have been able to have a lot more units. And those units probably could have broken here. You wouldn't have known what units to make, though, unless you actually saw what was here. So don't be afraid to make a tick and run it in. Or you can build Frontline radar, even though it's going to die, right? A Frontline radar has 680. Like if you build one like here, it'll actually see a lot of what's over there, and you can reclaim it later. That's fine. But a tick is perfectly fine, right? A couple ticks and you can just like run them in and go, hey, what's here? What's shooting me? Oh, LLTs. Let me make rocket bots. Gauntlets. That's so much metal, right? That's 2,500 metal. That's basically the cost of a T2 lab, right? It's 400 short of a T2 lab. T2 units here, if you had the energy for it, are so much better than gauntlets. It's not even funny. Or if you wanted to, you could have also just eaten those and built a rattlesnake. And once you went T2, and that would have been amazing. But this metal the metal in gauntlets is just nowhere near as effective as if it's in units or something else, generally speaking, right? If this 2,500 metal was rocket bots or pawns or something else, you probably could just run through a lot of these things and you would have been completely fine. So there's a lot of like other little minor things, like don't build, jammers so soon. The HLT discussion, trying to take mexes as soon as possible. But for me, I think if you want to improve your frontline play, always focus on scaling energy production. Have way more build power so that you can make units. And 3, queue all the things, right? A 1 rocket bot queue on repeat kind of works, but like literally, you can just be like, give me cons, give me pawns, give me maces, give me rocketeers, like build everything, right? Just queue up like 100 things so that if you ever look away and you get distracted, at least you've made units. And the same goes for your commander, right? You can issue a ton of commands to your commander. You can say, okay, assuming this isn't here, right? Like build the LOT there, do that, and then boost this unit, and then get a radar here, right? And then do that. Like maybe you get attacked and you need to break that string of commands, but if you don't and he finishes all of those, you're in a better position. So that is the first, 11 minutes of your game on Glacial Gap, and I hope it was useful.